In a wet and wild Australian Grand Prix, Lando Norris comes out on top. This is Shifting Happens. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Shifting Happens. My name is BaxtyB, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by four very fine gentlemen alongside me. We have got Shez, we've got Rory, we've got Fly, and we have got Marshall. We are here to talk all things Australian Grand Prix, because it's safe to say it was I wouldn't say it was a banger race, but it was an interesting race because there was a hell of a lot that happened. I'll do a quick recap of the race. Victory for Lando Norris, as we've already established, and he was joined on the podium by Max Verstappen. That never happens. And George Russell coming in third. Kimi Antonelli came fourth with the best rookie result on debut in 10 years, or 11 years, since K-Mag's P2 at the same track. Albon fifth, Stroll sixth, Hulkenberg seventh, scoring more points in one race than Sauber did in an entire season last year, and is now the highest placed Ferrari driver in the championship. Charles Leclerc is 8th, Oscar Piastri 9th, Lewis Hamilton 10th, and your non-point scorers were Gasly, Tsunoda, Ocon, and Behrman, and your non-finishers were Liam Lawson, Gabriel Bortoleto, another rookie, Fernando Alonso, Carlos Sainz, Jack Doohan, and Isaac Hadjar. Shez, going to come to you first. What did you make of the race, and how much do you remember of it, considering that we had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch it?
Yeah, man, it was pretty early, wasn't it? I got used to waking up at a decent hour on my time, but can't complain really because it's going to get a lot easier for us and a lot more difficult for everyone else. And I definitely know what it feels like to watch an entire Formula One season in Melbourne. It is not pretty. I think I was really excited going into the race. I had a feeling, given qualifying, pre-season testing, the whole lot of it, that McLaren would have a fairly big advantage, and that's how it kind of played out in the race. And yet the rain gods and Fernando Alonso's aptly timed safety car helped us out a little bit, because it was getting a little dull in the middle, wasn't it? Once Piastri had cleared Max Verstappen after a really rare mistake from him, the McLarens pulled out like 15 seconds. And then Fernando did his thing. The rain came down. The McLarens went off. And it was fun and games from there on in. I thought it was thoroughly enjoyable from there. Loads of stuff to get our teeth stuck into. Lando 2.0 or whatever we're calling him right now. How close really was Oscar? Is he going to be in there for a challenge? Is Max really going to be snapping at their heels for the rest of the season? Has he got a car to do it? And the Ferraris doing Ferrari things on debut for Lewis Hamilton. Loads to get our teeth into. So even though it wasn't the most interesting race in the middle, actually, I thought there's quite a lot to talk about, and I'm quite excited to get chatting about it with you guys.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's get into the first topic, which is the McLaren rocket ship. Because I think it's fair to say we thought it from testing that McLaren would have the quickest car, but the evidence was there on Saturday. Rory, what's your take on McLaren's performance overall? And then we'll talk about the specifics in what happened in the race.
It's pretty ominous, wasn't it? It was like, even though we were all hyping this season up to be one of the closest ever, we honestly could have a Red Bull 2023 season all over, but not to that extent, I think. But I do think it will be the two McLarens will be fighting with each other, and then this is also in this, depending on what we're going to talk about later, the flexi rules, TD coming in after Spain. Does that bring any? Does that change the field or whatever? But I do think at the moment it's both McLarens, and I think there's going to be Max Verstappen just lurking around, overdriving that Red Bull. But yeah, I think the McLarens, they look the better of the cars. Their tire wear is pretty good. So they actually, I think, they improved on strategy, I think, so far, considering that last year the McLaren of old would have been, especially where we had the kind of like, not controversial, but kind of like and a team order or Piastri being told to back off. If that was McLaren last year, it probably would have been a clear message. It probably would be if you can slow down if you want to. We're not telling you have to slow down, but yeah, I think McLaren looked like a better improvement overall operationally in this race. I know it's only one race you have to go off by, but they look pretty. I think they look like the force to beat this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When Tom Stallard said to Piastri, he said, "You know the rules." I was thinking, if they say papaya rules, I was watching on my phone in bed because hello, early in the morning, and that phone was nearly launched out the window. Fly, what did you make of the race and Oscar Piastri in particular? Like, how do you rate his performance?
I mean, when you look at the overall performance of, first of all, the car, I mean, for them to be almost 2 full seconds ahead of, I think, last time I checked, I think Lewis Hamilton was almost it was a 2.1 at one point, right? Because in the whole beginning, it was Oscar, Max, and it was Lando, Oscar, Max, or whichever way you put it. It was basically the 3 drivers versus everybody else. And George Russell seemed like he was the train guy that led everybody right behind him. I thought Oscar got shouted, man. I think me and you had this discussion before the show. They went to, and I'm talking about the telecast, which I'm sure our friend Marshall will have plenty to say about it, which I cannot wait for that part of the show, guys, so please don't miss it. At some point, they went to Zach Brown. I don't know if it was the second or third time they went to him. They asked him, Zach, what happens if Oscar's in range of Lando? What will be the team's order then? He said, then we'll race. That wasn't the case, and I'm trying to figure out what lap it was when Oscar was literally half a second behind him and had DRS, and then he was told, hold position. I really don't know what the difference was between telling him to do that, and then 2 laps later when he had the little spun and he ends up being 2 seconds behind Lando instead of half a second, then they're telling him, okay, now you're okay to race. Did we miss a rain shower between those 2 laps? Did we somehow go somewhere where we were supposed? I don't really know what was the case. So I thought he was shut out from that. And it's very unfortunately what happened to him towards the end, because we saw both Lando and Oscar get that patch of rain first from everyone. And then they both went to the left and everything was just total chaotic. But the fact that young man, not only because of it's his home race, but he literally sat there trying to figure out how to get his car in reverse, no matter how long it took, and to still finish in the points. Not to mention the takeover that me and you talked about on Lewis. I mean, I have to still give it a 10 out of 10. I know it's not the greatest result, but just for the effort and knowing what the opportunity that he had to take over and get, at least lead his hometown race, that to me it was taken away once again by his team. I'm still going to give that young man a 10 out of 10, because not a lot of guys would have just stood there after being on the grass and be like, okay, now what am I going to do? Is it going to keep raining? Do I have to chance it? Because we've seen in plenty of positions, unless you're Lance Stroll, where you just literally deliberately just put your car in a position not to finish the race. We know that Oscar's mindset is totally different, right? The young man has it to become a future champion in this league. So to me, I'm still going to give it a 10 out of 10, even though, like I said, I still think that he was kind of holded from overtaking Lando when he was catching up to him.
Yeah, I mean, Marshall, your take on Oscar, and then also your thoughts on Lando as well. Like, is this a new dawn for Lando Norris, or are we going to see more of the same later on in the season?
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to say, Lance had a pretty good race, so let's leave him alone. He was good. I'll give the boy credit when it's due,
He's six.
But I mean, he's always been decent in the rain. Like, it's weird. It's one of those weird things where, like, when it's wet, Lance seems to come alive sometimes. It's weird. But, they made the right call in that particular circumstance. Can I just take a quick little detour here to just say, when you race in a circle, the possibility is that the rain can hit anywhere. Just because you're in the lead doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be you first. So this whole idea that, like, oh, they're going to hit the rain first. No, what if the rain hit in corner 3 when, a 8th place was coming by. Like it doesn't really work that way. So I was really that was a failure of the broadcast, but we'll get back to those. And then just in terms of, I think McLaren clearly has the pace in hand. I think that they did execute well, except for their one little off. I do want to just caution, because we've seen this before. When your performance advantage is as large as it appears like it might be for McLaren, your operational deficiencies can be overcome by just, having pace in hand. And we saw this with Mercedes in their best era. Like their operational procedures had become so conservative that once they no longer had the best car, they were getting out strategized because they had become accustomed to not needing to gamble ever. So it's like when you have sort of narrow margins, these things become all the difference. But I'm not going to say that this is like all McLaren's problems are fixed because they managed to win a race where they had massive pace advantage. It's like they still had the same old challenges where they weren't sure when the rain was coming. There was some indecision on the radio, and they were like doing the same team strategy back and forth. And like when Zach came on the broadcast, like that 2 seconds hesitation where he said, then they race, said everything. Like that 2 seconds where he didn't answer right away said way more than let them race. Like it was that little hesitation where you knew there were shenanigans afoot, that it wasn't a true race in any sense. They were going to manage their pace and manage this stint where the inters were wearing out to find that place. And it came with Alonso, but or actually, no, it came. Yeah, I guess it would have come with Alonso when they managed to get their change onto slicks, right? And then change back onto wets when the rain came down. But it wasn't like an operational masterclass. It was just, it looks like it's better when you have an advantage that no one's touching you. So if the rest of the field closes in, and if the technical directives and flexi wings and all this stuff, which I predict will be a nothing burger, I don't think it'll have much impact on McLaren's advantage, because I think that their advantage is far beyond just some little slat in the rear wing. Like this is all kind of a nothing burger, but that's just my opinion. I think that unless the other teams catch up, then you have a margin where these things that caught them out last year won't catch them out this year.
We've got a comment from Slipstream Merchant. He says, team orders in race 1 is poor from McLaren. If that continues, Oscar needs to pull a Vettel. I'm assuming that is multi-21 he's referring to. Look, I felt like the team orders, there was a very specific reason why they did it. I still think the mantra is going to be let them race until such time that if Max is really there, which I expect him to be, given I've predicted he's going to win the championship this year, I feel like they will have to do, right, okay, Lando's the guy or Oscar's the guy. And at the moment you say Lando's the guy, he will get preference over Oscar because he's ahead in the championship. So that's what I would expect them to do, and they would have to make that decision pretty quickly, I feel. But I felt like the team orders, there was something very specific about that, and I feel on the whole they're going to let them race. Shez, so do you agree with that, or?
Yeah, yes. In essence, I do. There was a very specific situation. They were worried about the changeover. They wanted to. I think what they really.
You hesitated like Zach there, Shez.
Because there's a hesitation to be had there, Marshall. The reason I say that is because yes, there was a specific reason. Yes, they wanted to try and double stack them when they came in for their pit stops. They were waiting for the changeover time, and they wanted to be able to do that. Fine, great. But this comes back to. So Zach did a little interview in the off season at a publication that I quite like, the Intercooler. It's Car Mag. It's quite fun to read and listen to. And one of the things he said there was specifically about Monza, and he said that look, we hadn't quite got our rules of engagement correct at that point. All we'd said was go race, leave each other a bit of room, don't do anything silly. So Lando in that situation had taken that as, well, I'm in the lead, I've got to De La Roger in the lead, the only person behind me is my teammate, so I should get a clear run. Oscar took that to mean, well, actually, I've got a decent run at my teammate. He's going slow for some reason. I'm gonna try and overtake him, which he did, and he did that cleanly. So you can't really complain about that too much from the McLaren pit wall's point of view. But it was a bit risky. So what Zach said is that after that had happened, they said we had to change our rules of engagement and say that actually. You can attack each other once the situation allows. And that is why I think there was a bit of hesitation in Zach's answer before he gave that let them race, because he wanted that the team had already agreed that there would be a particular situation. And Oscar didn't meet that situation, even if in his own performance and in his own head, he was the quicker, more attacking driver able to take it. And that was, unfortunately, his best opportunity. So there was an unfortunate divergence between the best thing for the team in that moment and the best thing for Oscar in that moment, and that's ultimately why we got that team orders rule, and it was made to look more unfortunate because then Oscar had that little error into turn 6, didn't he? That put him behind a bit further, and that was the point at which we hear the team radio saying, "Oh yeah, now you're free to race," and then it looks even worse. I'm not entirely sure that was the exact timings of how all that happened, but it does make Oscar look a bit worse. But I do want to say, just in response to Fly's little comment about giving Oscar 10 out of 10. I mean, I can't. He did come off worse ultimately, didn't he? And that there was a bit of an ability gap, not massive, but it was there. But the problem that McLaren are going to have now is that versus the other teams in the top 4, they've probably got the closest gap between their two drivers. Like Oscar was less than a tenth away from Lando, and I've just been looking at the telemetry again for their qualifying laps. Like when they come out of turn 6, Lando gets an absolutely phenomenal exit, and is ahead going down the straight into the quick corner at the the turn 9-10. And I think if he watches on board, he runs into either Yuki Tsunoda or Isaac Hadjar. I think he gets a little bit of a tow. I mean, it's these tiny little margins that give one driver an advantage over the other, and that ultimately, when they're this close, is what dictates what happens in the race. So it's a tricky one, but I do understand the papaya rules nonsense, even if I don't agree with it.
Yeah. So you said that the gap, I mean, it was 0.014 in that middle stint between them. That's literally how close it was, and this is going to be a benefit for McLaren having two very competitive drivers, but it's also going to be a problem for them, particularly when you've got Max Verstappen lurking and possibly the Ferraris, who we're going to get to you, Ferrari. We are going to get to you.
Baxty, how close really do you think Max was? I mean, this is something that's come up quite a bit in the discourse around this race, because up until the point that the rain came down, he was losing a second a lap to these.
Oh, he was getting hammered. Yeah,
if this was a dry race, that situation wouldn't have happened. And I guess in China, if that's what we see, is that not what we're expecting to happen as well?
Yeah, I mean, in China, I fully expect the McLarens to be up the road, particularly Lando, who was very impressive in China last year. Had an excellent race. Was the only person attempting to chase Max down when Max was still in his absolute dominance. But with Max, he is somebody who will just always be there or thereabouts. He's in that position right now where he's got a car. Okay, it's not the RB19 or the RB20 in the early days of the RB20, but it's still a car he can fight with. And he will always be sniffing around the podium, on the podium. And what McLaren need to do is they need to make sure that both cars are in front of him, and then they can challenge. If one of them is losing ground, that's where Max then really becomes a contender for the championship. And if the McLarens hit each other and take each other out, and he can then sneak in and take a win. And obviously the Ferraris can do the same if they sort themselves out. So,
Baxty, are you alluding to the McLaren's doing that at Spain this year?
Oh God, don't remind me of that one. Yeah. How about
May I just share a quick comment, because I know that Shez, he brought up Brown's comments in September of 2024 when we were in Monza. So one of the quotes that has always stuck with me was one they said here, and I did put it in the chat, says, they're both young drivers who want to win. We have always believed in having two number ones. That's always been the McLaren's way. It can be difficult to manage. We've seen it with Senna and Prost. And then today we get the report, which it was there that Oscar will be speaking with McLaren to better understand the team's decision on team orders. Like if they didn't speak about this in the offseason, right? So
that's a bit of a paranoia there, isn't it? Like
that's just something there, right?
Yeah. But clearly there has been a conversation. But my concern about all of this is that McLaren are doing their engineering thing again. They're trying to make what is a fluid, dynamic situation very, very strict and rigid. They were talking about before the race, Lando was talking about boundaries around the car. Like, and someone said to me that sounds really sensible. To me, that sounds really McLaren. Like, we're getting out and actually measuring how far away from the other driver you're allowed to be. That's just not how racing works. And I don't think you can, on one hand say we're allowing our drivers to race freely, and on the other hand have such rigid rules about the rules of engagement when they actually happen. I just don't think racing works that way.
If team orders, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Like, I would just rather they be
exactly.
I'd rather they just be upfront about it. Like, just say, you know what, but the situation is much different than it was in the 90s or the 2000s, where you couldn't just upfront go and say that. Like, you couldn't just say, so a lot of it is like, oh, we have to negotiate our team orders behind closed doors, and then we have to present it to the media and the fans as if it's an equal fight, and everybody knows that it's not. So you end up with these like ridiculous situations where they're like, oh yeah, they're free to race, but there's like an asterisk and then a bunch of different, like Toto did it so much with the Mercedes situation. Like,
that's slightly different, I would say, simply because they were so far ahead.
Yeah, they tried.
Yeah,
but I mean, at a certain point, when you have two people that competitive and one guy who feels like he's always coming off second best, well, the gloves are going to eventually come off. I just don't know if Piastri has that temperament or experience to be close enough to Lando for it to matter consistently. Like, not he could be close, but not close enough to matter consistently.
Yes, he is talking about qualifying. That's what he's talking about.
He was less than a tenth away from him in qualifying.
But I'm not just talking about one race here. I'm talking about like all of last year, and
the man's third season in Formula One. Give him a break.
But hey, Jacques Villeneuve almost won in his debut, so my standards
Lewis
are
won
high.
in his second season, so
Yeah, I mean, it's not the Formula, like they call it the Piranha Club, not the Take Your Time Club.
Yeah, I would say that as a percentage, didn't Oscar win in his second season in Formula One? He did win, didn't he?
He won a sprint race.
Oh, he didn't win in
2 races. He won 2 races
he
last year,
Hungary.
and he won the sprint in his rookie season.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So he did win a couple of races. That's interesting.
But Lewis won a championship in his second season, didn't he?
Yeah, he had a car. had a car to do it. Lando couldn't even win.
Details, mate. Details.
Wasn't he driving a Ferrari in 2008?
Who, Oscar Piastri? Pretty sure.
No. Rory, stop it. Another comment from Slipstream Merchant here. So Zach wants DRS overtakes only. That's just basically whoever qualifies ahead stays ahead. I mean, that is pretty much the rules of engagement, isn't it? It is very much, if you are ahead after turn 1, you will be the guy that gets the preference. Now, McLaren had that rule in place last year in Hungary, for example, and then screwed it up, and then basically begged Lando to give the position. And then, that was the rule in Monza, and Lando just had to deal with it. He got done by a very good overtake by his teammate. I think the two of them know where the line is. They know the boundaries that they have amongst each other in terms of, they know not to hit each other and crash out and everything else. They probably will. It's going to happen. You've got two very good teammates. They're going to collide. It's just the way things are in Formula One. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic goes in the future. But I want to focus on Lando a little bit more. Just, he was our race winner. We should talk about him. I thought this was an excellent drive by Lando. Controlled everything very well at the front. I liked him. Obviously didn't bottle the start, which, as somebody pointed out, he's now kept the lead on his last 3 starts. So the Qatar sprint, Abu Dhabi, and now this. So last 3 starts from pole, he hasn't lost the lead. And one thing I liked was, because you could see Max coming through, and you're thinking, oh, Max is going to go, he's going to do the thing. And he just moved a little bit and checked Max's progress. I was like, okay, that's good, Lando. Okay, you've spotted the danger, because Max on a wet start, he's like about 30 meters up the road normally compared to everyone else. And if you saw the way he went round Oscar, just finding that grip, crazy move at the start. But I thought he handled the pressure well, and it'll be interesting to see how he handles it going forward. Marshall, what did you make of Lando's performance on yesterday?
I mean, it was good. I don't think it was an all-time performance. Everybody is going to get mad at me for that one, because I posted that on Threads yesterday that at the end of the race, when they said it was an all-time performance, I was just like, that's a little bit of hyperbole there from Sky Sports. And I felt like he did what he had to do. He was obviously thrown, there's 2 parts of it. He had a car with the ultimate pace to if there hadn't have been the rain or the safety cars, like, he would have driven off into the distance, and he and Oscar together, and they would have finished within a few seconds of each other, miles up the road from Verstappen. But as the great Murray Walker liked to say, but it didn't, so it wasn't. And everybody is like, oh, well, there was safety cars. Like, yeah, there were safety cars. Those actually happened. So you can only evaluate based off the performances of what happened. I was more impressed with Max's race. I think that he did a lot better with a lot worse, and he took advantage of the situations that were presented and snagged the best result that he could with the equipment that he had on the day. I really don't think that he had anything for Lando. And Lando did what he had to do. He kept it out of the grass when Oscar didn't. And I mean, when you think about that too, Lando was the first one to hit the greasy track, and he was the one that kept it. Usually it's the other way around. The first guy goes off and loses it, and the second guy manages to gather it up. So, he showed some positive signs. I think he had a good race. I think that he did what he needed to do. But I think, when you're comparing, or if you're giving your driver of the day, I'm giving it to Max. I know he did make his slight run wide when his tires were going off and drove through the puddles or whatever. But, in tricky conditions with a car that was eating its tires, he did everything right. And when the safety car happened and when the rain happened, he was right there to capitalize. If Lando had gone off, he would have potentially won that race. Like, he was right there, and he had no business being right there. So I think, it just goes to show that if you give Max Verstappen the slightest opening, he's going to be there. So, Lando did what he had to do, and he deserved the win. McLaren has the best car. And how many races did, Verstappen win with the best car where he didn't have a challenge from behind and didn't really need to do much? So, swings and roundabouts, it's coming back to McLaren, and you just have to accept that they have the stronger position right now, and he did what he needed to do. I think that it's hard to evaluate when it's the first race in such strange conditions, but we'll get a sense. I think we'll be able to relitigate Australia once we see what their actual pace in China is, if that makes sense. Because if we see that like Max is half a minute down the road in third place behind the McLarens in China, then that will reframe his performance in or if the Red Bull struggles and is in the battle for the lower points, if we see sort of the state of play, we can look back at this race, but having no sample size, you're kind of just guessing. But
yeah, and Marshall, your favorite thing is happening this weekend. It's a sprint weekend, so I hope.
God.
Yeah, I hope
Already?
you're.
Already? Oh my god!
Yeah, it's a sprint weekend in China once again, so I hope you're looking forward to that, Marshall, because I know it's your favorite thing.
It's just I don't like qualifying on Fridays. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so yeah, I thought it was a good drive from Lando. Shez, Rory, Fly, who wants to come in and comment on Lando?
Be my guests, people. Otherwise, I'm gonna diatribe for another half an hour.
Are you, mate? Are you?
No, as the supposed Lando hater on this podcast, I will come in and talk about Lando in a positive light for a bit. I agree with Marshall's point. I think from a previous statement probably was a bit exaggerating, but I do think that we'll have to see how China goes. That it could be if they're up like 30 seconds up the top of the field, both drivers, we could have a different story. But I think Lando, like, he did his job. He didn't crash. He didn't make any mistakes, really. He was in front. He could have easily been the fastest car and binned into the wall. It's like he did his job, that he maximized results. So I think I can top marks for that. I won't call Lando 2.0 at the moment. We need to see how he goes into the season. If we're like around round 17 and 18, and he's like this, and he's maintained it throughout the season that he's not made mistakes, he's able to match it, able to match when wheel fights, and not like struggling with pressure. I think we can maybe make the point as a Lando 2.0, but at the moment it's a small sample size. It's like it's like when we called Bottas 2.0 after one race, and we saw how that went in 2019 and 2020. To
whom it may concern, oh wait, I'm still slow.
Yeah.
But no, I think Lando could be happy with his race weekend. Same Piastri. Link with what Mark spoke for Verstappen. I think this is like for me was an argument of, if Red Bull didn't have Max Verstappen, where would Red Bull be? Because Max Verstappen was
in the wall, right?
Yeah, they would be in the wall. They would be. Red Bull would be in the wall, but not Max Verstappen probably. But I do think Max was overdriving that car, no doubt about it. But he was able to overdrive in a way that he was able to maximize the results. Like the one wasn't Max offer. He was in the post race, like after they come to the podium where they're parked underneath the main straight, and who was it on comments by to ask us how did you feel about finishing P2, and Max said, well, this is 18 more points than they got last year, so considering that Max is taking on the chin, saying like, I've gained points out of it last year at DNF, it's better result than they got last year. So I think if Max can be consistent on his days and just snatch up points where it doesn't look like it, because I think Red Bull didn't expect to probably be on the podium this weekend. Maybe not second, maybe probably third, fighting for fourth. But yeah, I think it was. I think it was for those three drivers. I think they'd be happy with their weekend.
Cool, thank you, Rory. Shez.
Sure. Listen, I am definitely not calling Lando's drive, a wet drive for the ages. It was a good drive for him, and I think that's the important point here. sort of went through that race and sequentially answered some of the things that we thought might be a problem. Sochi 2021, the poor call about tyres. There was a better conversation between him and Will Joseph about when they're going to change tyres. Handling the pressure from behind. Yep, check, got that under control as well, pretty much. Handling the start, as you say, actually, I was pretty impressed by that sort of subtle movement as well, because the outside line into turn one in Melbourne is always the place that you're going to get overtaken. Actually, he handled that pretty well. So I think Lando has kind of demonstrated, at least in this race, that if he has a significant car advantage, that he can reliably bring home the bacon. The problem is, though, that doesn't make you an all-time great, because the guy sitting behind him who finished second did that in a car that was 0.3 off the pace in qualifying. Yeah, sure, you can talk about safety cars and all the rest of it, but mate, Max in that situation in Brazil starting 17th, that win was inevitable. Lando, with 6 laps to go, with Max behind him, we're all loosening our collars thinking, oh my God, is he going to chuck this away? And he almost bloody did as well with that turn 6 mistake. I mean, come on, Lando. If you're going to show us that you've learned something, come on, do it. It's not about, waltzing off 30 seconds down the road when you've got a car that can do that for you in the dry. It's in these little moments where you win and lose races, and this weekend it worked out for him, and he has calmed my fears about certain aspects of his driving. But I mean, this is, Marshall, I like a rear-facing camera when it comes to mirroring stuff from the past. But I think you brought up, when we talked about this before, that it might be a 1996 style situation where you've got somebody like Lando in a car that's miles up the road, and the form, the peak driver of that generation, who's head and shoulders above everybody else, in a car that just isn't on that level, sniping for wins here and there. That's kind of what Max did yesterday.
I mean, it's kind of like Max in the Mercedes era too.
He's got form, hasn't he? Definitely has. He definitely knows how to do that. But there's an inevitability about Max, I think, that Lando lacks, and I don't know if that's going to come with more experience of this situation, or if it's just something you're born with. Don't know.
Maybe it's why Damon has such an affinity for Lando.
Maybe. Well, lest we get stuck on McLaren for the whole of this podcast, we've got quite a bit more to get through. We're going to take a quick trip to Marshall's post, because I know that Marshall wishes to discuss elements of the broadcast that he was not happy with. So, Marshall, we're going to mute our mics and we're just going to...
All right, so I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can, but I think that Martin Brundle has done... I mean, he's the preeminent broadcaster of this generation. He's a former racer who raced in a very dangerous time, and he has a lot of insight and experiences that frame his commentary. Unfortunately, I also think that he has kind of strayed too far from perhaps what his time was and is, and that his experiences don't really translate well to the current time, because it was 30 years ago when he retired, right? Now, I still think that he's a good broadcaster. I think that he has good insights, but I think that he was flat out wrong when he was kind of minorly freaking out about there being a rescue vehicle or a tow truck on the track during a complete and full safety car intervention. I think that Martin was instrumental in some of the changes that happened in Formula One. I think he still has a lot of perhaps poor memories of his time when it was customary for cars to be left trackside for the entire race. like disabled in crash cars, just to be left in place, for marshals to be on track during, races, for interventions to happen while cars were racing past at full speed. That used to happen. And he actually went off in the rain in Japan in 1994 and struck a marshal and broke his leg. And that was a terrible memory for him and a terrible incident. And he became, a crusader for safety, for increasing the use of safety cars, for the VSC. He was a voice after the unfortunate passing of Jules Bianchi to institute better rules for safety cars, virtual safety cars, etc. He's always been sort of the guy of this generation that has pushed safety forward. But I feel like you undermine that point, or you undermine that authority, when you just default freak out about everything, because then it doesn't frame the actual areas for improvement and results in people kind of freaking out about every little thing, regardless of the actual danger. So, people were saying to me, and I just want to clarify this, like, yes, people can crash under safety car. We saw Carlos Sainz do that. But Carlos Sainz didn't throw it into the wall after the safety car had been on the track for 3 laps. The entire pack had caught up to the tail and was following the safety car at reduced speed. That's not when Carlos Sainz crashed. Carlos Sainz crashed when he was running to a delta to try and catch up the pack before the safety car had neutralized the race. You don't release safety vehicles until the race is neutralized. So don't say, oh, well, Colapinto crashed at Brazil under safety car, so therefore we shouldn't release vehicles under safety car. That doesn't make sense. What's a safety car for? Why do you even have it in the rules if everything should be a red flag and you just bring all the cars in before you can put a tow truck on the track? Like, you can't operate to this standard, because that's what a safety car is for. So yes, you call the safety car, you don't immediately dispatch the safety vehicles, you wait until everyone has caught up to the tail, you wait until the pack is neutralized. The safety car driver controls the pace, knows where the vehicles are on the track, so is slowing down through the zones where there are vehicles present. And there was some quotes by Verstappen and Norris and George after the race that they basically said that this was no issue. Lando said that if you hit that, then you shouldn't be an F1 driver, and Max said it was not an issue. So anyone who's sort of on this train, it's like, what is a safety car for if it's not for recovering vehicles that have crashed safely? Like, that's the entire point of having a safety car. I understand that Martin got the jitters, but I don't really think that that was productive criticism. I don't think that that was a particularly dangerous situation, because if you look at it, the safety car cut through the right-hander through the runoff, and Lando could have followed the safety car through that area, but he didn't want to get dirt on his tires, so he decided to stay to the left and kind of go past the truck a little closer than he needed to, because he was doing a consideration competitively that he didn't want to take the line that the safety car had. So he had it fully under control. He knew what he was doing. He even said in the post race he knew what he was doing. It's not an issue. This is not to say that there aren't other things that we can do better. It's not to say that in Suzuka 2022, where people have brought it up, that they should have waited longer before putting the tractor on the track in that instance. There are always things you can do better, but this is not one of those times. And this is like, I just wish people would watch an IMSA race, an IndyCar race, a WEC race, any other race, and see how many vehicles are all over the track while the cars circulate behind the pace car. And you would be blown away if all you watch is Formula One. Please, please, please watch an IndyCar race, especially at a street circuit with a narrow concrete canyon. You got like the AMR safety, 2 tow trucks, you got a street blower, a jet dryer. They're all going around at like 2 miles an hour while the entire pack goes by, and nobody hits anything because they know it's there. They're being radioed. Everybody knows, and they're all following the safety car in a safe manner. It's okay. It'll be fine. Relax, everybody. Thank you.
And that has been your weekly visit to Marshall's Post. By the way, if anyone has like any questions for Marshall, Marshall is literally a marshal. That he does this, he volunteers. So this is why he speaks with authority and expertise on these things. That's why I wanted you to say that, because I know you had some things you wanted to bring up, and so that was important to get out there. Right, we've got to talk about Ferrari, because Ferrari, like, obviously it was a historic weekend. Rory's ready to go. They didn't just Ferrari, they Ferrari'd so unbelievably hard. Like, this was peak Ferrari. This was like optimum screw up, like finest Italian cooking you've seen. So Rory, go ahead.
I wouldn't say it was peak. Like, it was peak Ferrari, but like there is levels to Ferrari like mess ups. Like, this was for Lewis's first weekend Ferrari in a competitive manner. Yes, he's done testing, he's done private testing, so forth. But this was competitive race weekend. This was, I think I summed up on a Threads post. I said Lewis Hamilton basically got the whole Ferrari experience in one. He didn't get the mechanical DNF. Yes, he had those gear sync problems, but that was sorted by a few seconds. But he had his first banana where he spun in qualifying. And unfortunately, Binotto wasn't here to initiate the process of that cultural icon. We had the first strategy disaster class. We'll probably get into it, which Carlos Sainz who's at Williams, pretty much called Ferrari out, but James Vowles subtly said didn't mention Ferrari, but we will mention it probably. We also had the first engineer back and forth. It wasn't. It was Charles and Charles' former engineer. Forget his name. He's at Cadillac Racing now, but we had teething problems with that learning on the job. Xavi, yeah. We had the first setup disaster class, making rash decisions on setup this weekend, going into the qualifying into the race, and we had the first Ferrari quality disaster class. So yes, it wasn't a proper disaster class where they go out in Q1 like many times where drivers gone out, but still. It reminded me of like 2019 Ferrari Australia, where like everyone thought Ferrari did very well in testing, and then they rock up to Australia and Ferrari are like about 3 or 4 tenths off pole because Mercedes just turned off the wick. But yeah, I think it wasn't like I mentioned like peak Ferrari disaster like on seriousness, but it was there. We need to do a ranking of Ferrari disaster classes. Like get a tier list up, and we need to rank Ferrari disaster classes over the years, because it's up there, but it's like the whole 2020 season for Ferrari was a mess. So that's up there. But I think this is maybe I would say a low C, but maybe a high B down to a high C. Maybe it has to be.
Monza a couple of years ago when they had both guys pit, and they're Charles, stay out, and they still both went in.
Monaco, yeah.
Oh,
Monaco,
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in Monaco.
Well,
I
think the rating of the disaster class aligns with the meme that we get out of it, and in terms of that, we got it must be the water. So
words of wisdom, Marsh. Words of wisdom.
In terms of disaster class, when you get a meme that goes with it, it's on the top. Like it's
like when George Russell had that sweat.
Add that
moment.
to the words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Is it raining?
No, it's just sweat. It's sweat, George.
Dudley was great.
Fly, how did you ingest the Lewis's radio interactions with Ricky when he was basically telling him to shut the up?
It kind of reminded me a lot, like Rory says, with Carlos Sainz the last couple of years, and where there were moments that Carlos told the engineer, listen, let me do my thing. And you can clearly hear come like repeatedly, he'd go again and tell him the same thing. It's like, I get it. Just let me race. And at some point, I kind of realized, wait a minute, these two have never actually worked together in an actual race. Yes, they've been through in quali and in a practice session and stuff, but obviously this is a live thing. I listen, the way that Lewis Hamilton answered him the first time, forgot if it was to press K9 on the steering wheel, and I believe it was to overtake, or however the case was. I mean, you would think that Lewis Hamilton knows that button is for overtake. I would assume he would know that button is to overtake. To ask him again the same thing, a world champion of his standards, like if, no offense to Isaac Hajar, Oliver Berman, I'm not even going to put Antonelli in there. No, I said Antonelli. Our friend who's not here today will actually love me because I didn't say his first name. I felt like it was a struggle, man, and it was quite. It was not that it was sad, but it was damn like you. It's like, and I think Marshall said it. Anything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and it just wasn't 1 or 2, 3 things. It was the end of practice 2. I don't know what happened to that car. Obviously, it is practice. I get it. It's a practice session. After practice 2, that car wasn't the same anymore. Not on the straights, not in the turns, absolutely nothing. It was not the Ferrari that we saw. And I could kind of tell that Lewis Hamilton was sitting in the back waiting for something to happen. And it did. And all of a sudden, he's leading the race. And you're asking yourself, can they possibly botch this up right now? How can Ferrari, after the issues they've had all race long, now be in such a wonderful position to at least get a podium spot for at least a Lewis Hamilton? I get Charles had his issues as well, which, by the way, he almost hit Lewis a couple of times, but it is what it is. And it just happened. And I'm thinking to myself, is Binotto here, or is he in the garage a couple of things next door? It's like, no, he's not. It's the same team with the same mistakes. It was frustrating for me, for Lewis, because we all wanted him. He had an opportunity. And once again, it's this combination of communication not working, drivers not being on the same page. And then you kind of look at Charles, and he kind of had the same issues. Well, not to say that his engineer were going back and forth, but he had other stuff happening too at the same time. You're like, you know what? This just sums up the Ferrari weekend as a whole, right? There's just no botching it, and they botched it. So
yeah. My take on it is that, like, the radio communication thing, I think people are overreacting to it a little bit. Like, they're working each other out. Like, clearly Ricky has worked with drivers previously who need a bit more guidance, like and who want to have that information given to them, whereas Lewis is just like, you tell him once, he's got it. I mean, Lewis was probably pining for Bono, as you're kind of like, Bono. Sorry, if you know that meme, you understand what I mean. But, like, you know, that will come with time. They've just got to work each other out in that regard. But Jesus Christ, this was bad. This was bad. This is why I said afterwards, I said, this is why I warned you about this, Lewis Hamilton fans. I warned you that you were going to get weekends like this, that this was going to happen. And it was going to cause issue. And, you know, people were telling me, oh, but he's appreciated at Ferrari. He's like, is that going to win him races and championships? No. Okay. They need to sort their operations out, because it was so bad and you could see it coming. Literally, your former driver predicted it. Literally predicted it.
He said, James Bowles said, like, Carlos came up to the pit wall and said, they won't pit in the rain. He didn't, and we all knew that was Ferrari he was referencing to, because that's where the Williams were fighting.
If your former driver is predicting what you're going to do, that needs to tell you, hang on, we might not have the right processes in place here. I mean, Jesus Christ. And then their setup, you know, where you've got a very, okay, it's going to rain, but it might be dry in places, and you need to have qualifying performance as well. But oh no, they decided to go with the extreme wet setup. What the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing? Like, and it was a complete disaster. Like, Lewis sat behind Alex Albon for lap after lap after lap, not able to pass. That shows you how badly wrong they got that setup. It was terrible. Shez, chime in on this, please.
It was pretty rubbish, right? But I think I do want to put the brakes a little bit on what this means going forward. Do you want to let Marshall go first? I think he's probably got something even more insightful to say than me. I can follow on after him.
Oh, well, first of all, I think the radio stuff, yeah, I agree with you, Baxty, that it's a bit overblown in terms of the communication thing. Different drivers prefer different communication about different items. I think that it's going to take them a few races. It's better than Kimi, leave me alone, I know what I'm doing, like it's not quite that. Like they're just feeling it out and seeing how it it manages to kind of work out between them, because yeah, he's had Bono for so long that he probably doesn't even know what he needs to even tell them what he wants, because he's just been in sync with Bono for so long that how do you just say, hey, Ricky, can you be Bono, please? Like, just do what Bono would do. It's not that easy. It's going to take them a process. And I actually said this before the season started, that there are all sorts of these little things, both in the car, with the team, that is just going to be a massive adjustment for him, having come from one environment for so long. And I think that anyone that had, sort of expectations that this is just going to hit the ground running, I do think that those are a little bit unrealistic in the year 2025, when, these are such specialized pieces of equipment. Like he was talking and testing about how the steering wheel buttons are all different. They all do different things. They're all in different places. So like the drinks bottle is where his engine cut bottle, button is. And there's just everything. He was moving buttons around, like Behrman was talking about. Oh yeah, the Ferrari has the button here, and I see Lewis has moved it to here. Like it just, there's all this stuff that you have to consider. It is going to take time. And I'm really glad that I don't follow the Team LH discourse anymore, because they're not known for their patience. And I get it that they don't feel like they have a lot of time, but this is going to take a while. It's going to take a while. And as for Ferrari being a disaster, it happens sometimes that you just show up and your car doesn't perform how you want, and then it snowballs. I actually, other than staying out when it was wet, which Crofty thought was brilliant, which was completely inexplicable. Like, oh my God, Crofty, buddy. Anyway, other than that, like, I just think they didn't have the pace in the car. So when you rock up to a place and you're just like struggling, you're going to make other mistakes. And it's not like Lewis was even that far off Charles, really. He wasn't. Like, it was just a bad race. They didn't click. So I hope on a regular track in regular conditions, where it's not like 35 degrees one day and then 17 degrees and rainy the next, that we'll have a more accurate representation. But I am feeling really bad about my preseason prediction now. I'm not going to lie, like really bad.
Fair enough. Shez, do you want to come in quickly?
I kind of feel the same way with picking Oscar as a world champion. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I would caution against throwing all of your predictions out of the window after race one. Look, Ferrari, for me, the most disappointing thing about Ferrari was kind of seeing what McLaren were doing. McLaren were operationally last season not very good. You could tell they hadn't been in a championship fight very much, and they made loads of errors. They were doing that for a few seasons even before that. But in the race in Melbourne, actually, you could see that operationally they'd started to get their house in order a little bit more. And yeah, I mean, I take Marshall's point about them having a car advantage, but still, you still have to make the right calls. Whereas Ferrari, year on year on year on year, whether their car's good, whether their car's not so good, whether they've got a 7-time world champion in one of their cars or not, it doesn't really make any difference. They just keep making the same mistakes again and again and again. There will never be a season in which there will be a downpour and Ferrari will think, now's a good time to put the slicks on, and they'll just keep doing it. I don't really understand why. But that was the big error here. I do think it's more of a problem on Charles' car in Melbourne, because he's the guy that has been there, understands the team, and is supposed to have a good working relationship with everybody. And I do feel like I don't think I have recognized Stockholm syndrome quite as acutely as I did in Melbourne on Sunday, because Charles is just one of them. He's just as bad as everybody else. Like, when there's an actual decision to be made about tires, he's sitting there talking about, oh, I'm in a bathtub. Well done. Come on. Like, surely, like, when there's a back and forth about what tires to be on when the rain comes down, it is at least partly the driver's prerogative to say which tire they want to be on. I never heard any of that. And you compare that with the conversation the GP had with Max. There's no ambiguity there. There's a bit of information between the two of them. GP saying what the radar looks like, Max saying what the track feels like, and then they come to a joint decision about what they think the next thing to do is. This is why GP has been promoted to head of race engineering on the Red Bull pit wall, because there's an understanding about how the race is supposed to work. I just don't see the equivalent person at Ferrari. Lewis, I think, is in a slightly different boat, because like, he can't concentrate on strategy when he doesn't understand where the DRS button is yet. So there's a little bit of literally being thrown in at the deep end, which is what he said about this weekend. And the back and forth between him and Riccardo Adami was a lot more to do with just understanding what level of information he requires and what level of information you're going to get back from him. They're going to be learning that. It was a difficult race for them to go through, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe like in the heat of a race where lots of critical decisions needed to be made, then that's fine. That's the time to do it. But with Lewis in mind, any of you guys watch The Lord of the Rings? I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, because there's a quote that Gandalf says in the Two Towers, second movie. He talks about the little hobbits that have ended up with the Ents. If you haven't watched Two Towers, this isn't going to make any sense at all. But he talks about the coming of the hobbits as a little revolution that's going to shake the Ents out of their millennia-long stupor, as it were. And I wonder if having Lewis come in, having, I think especially Jerome D'Ambrosio come in as deputy team principal there, is going to help. Like, once he understands what the problems are, he's not going to do what Carlos Sainz did and try and call strategy from the car. No, there's no way you're going to win a championship that way. The way to do it is to change the processes. And if you ever listen to anything that I've ever talked about, I love process. And that is what I think Lewis can do. He can encourage the team to think in different ways, perhaps in more modern ways, to try and make their strategy and their race operations. Because, I mean, we're talking about their car not being good enough. I think they just didn't set the car up, and that's on the race team. And being able to bring all of that together is something that I think Lewis can do. And even if he doesn't win a championship there, which would break my heart ultimately, but even if he doesn't do that, if he can bring a change of mentality to the way they go about racing, operation, strategy, then he'll have done a good thing for Ferrari, ultimately. Rant over.
We can quickly,
I'll go with Shez. I think I completely agree with Shez about going with the engineer dynamic. I've seen calls on Twitter and threads that now there's social media platforms that Riccardo Adami should be replaced after that race, and I think that shouldn't be the case. An engineer and a driver needs time to work. It's only because that he's not, this engineer is not Bono. It's like Shez and Marshall mentioned, that Bono and Lewis worked in a telepathic communication. Like, they knew what each other were going to think, and I think that it will take time for this process to work. Also, like Fly, you mentioned, and BaxtyB, that and Marshall as well, that about the layout of the steering wheel has changed. It's changed both for Ferrari and Lewis. Lewis didn't make the change from the Ferrari normal style, and Ferrari had to get used to how Lewis operates the steering wheel as well. So I think as well this weekend, yes, it might be a great race to kind of like it was chaotic, but it also showed where both sides need to work, on Ferrari side especially, how they need to work on it. And I know the broadcast especially highlighted the Ferrari radios, but I think as well it was because more of this was played up to theatrics of Lewis's first race weekend with Ferrari. It was chaotic, and I hope it doesn't go forward like this, that they're going to focus on these radios more and more. But I do think it's just a learning process for both team and driver in how to work. And unfortunately, it's on live TV that you have ears listening into the radio, so it's probably. We're probably making the meeting everyone we're talking about, but I think it's more that it's just a learning process on live TV.
Yeah, we could talk about Ferrari all day, but we must move on. And we're going to be talking about the rookies, because it's safe to say the rookies on the whole, it was they learned the hard way this weekend, didn't they? Isaac Hadjar didn't make it to the start. He crashed out on the formation lap, and we're going to talk about a certain aspect of that shortly. Doohan crashed out on lap 1, which he really didn't need, because you could just hear Flavio Briatore just going, "That's a big check against you," as he prepares to put Franco Colapinto in the car. Bortoleto crashed out, though. His looked like a car failure. There was something very odd about that crash from Gabriel Bortoleto, and then Lawson span out, which he really didn't need. And I think Lawson, we're probably going to talk about him a bit more over the next few weeks. So agree with you, Fly. Not a good weekend. And then Behrman finished. He was the last of the finishers. Did have a bit of a spin, but that Haas looked slower than perhaps we thought it would be. And then, obviously, Kimi, as I mentioned earlier, best result on debut for a rookie in 11 years. So, Fly, your thoughts on the rookies? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, listen, when it comes to Liam Lawson, it's kind of crazy when you see Max Verstappen like in his practice ones is first and he's the 20th. I don't think I've ever seen that type of graph ever since I've been watching the sport. Seeing one Red Bull at 1 and then the next one on 20th. I thought Liam had a really, really difficult weekend. I do know that the pressure was there. First race with official Red Bull. I know he has the crowd with him because of being Ikiwi and whatnot, but it wasn't a great weekend for him. I really thought that Behrman kind of saved his weekend, even though he did ended up 14th, right? I believe. Even like the last one, even finished the race. I thought he recovered. But of course, the Haas's weren't really that good. Bortoleto, I thought he had a good. I mean, again, I'm gonna be totally honest. There was a certain part of this race that I really didn't care about 15 through 20, and honestly, because they weren't there. As you saw, it was like I believe there were 6 drivers missing, right? So it was just basically 1 through 14. I feel for Jack Doohan because you see the way Kimi. Oh, I said Kimi, right? Damn. You see the way that Antonelli was. I know I don't want any issues with our Ferrari guy. He's
no. Kimi is fine. He is officially Kimi in the opening sequence. Okay. If Formula One can call him Kimi, it's fine. Right. AJ, I'm telling you.
AJ wasn't my call. Kimi, listen, if you saw the onboard in, I believe it was either in the first couple of laps, the way he was able to maneuver, even though he did lose it for a second, but able to regather himself, that was just spectacular to see on board. And then you see Jack, and it's unfortunate. I think a couple of other drivers also spun out in the same section, but this time it was pouring rain. I feel for him because I know how important this is for him. With the whole Franco Colapinto over the shoulder type of ordeal, and people want to, they want to ask how many races does he have before he gets replaced. So I felt for him a little bit, but again, to me, when I look overall, I think Isaac Hadjar, that was odd, that was weird, that was really sad. And I'm sure we'll talk about Helmet's comments, which I believe was so uncalled for. And I think if there's anything that we needed was to see Anthony Hamilton go and console him afterwards, which I thought that was an amazing statement of just family of, hey, young man, it's not the only race. It's okay. But you can tell how much it was hurting him. It was killing him. I thought Helmut could have been a little bit more calmly with those comments, man. But hey, we did know at some point that, Azekadjar was going to be looked at with, a magnifying glass. I mean, they've been doing it with Yuki for I don't know how long, and they've never promoted him. And then they let go of Checo right away after he signed the extension. They replaced him. So not to get off topic here, but I think I feel for Isaac, because it's not great when that happens to you on the formation lap, and then you get those comments afterwards as a young driver. I think that could really not kill his spirits, but it's definitely something that I would say is now in the back of his mind. Because when Helmut says it, it's one thing. If fans want to say it, that's another, because he knows the type of pressure that the sport brings. And he knows that he's one of the rookies on this grid. But when Helmut says comments like that, I hope that does not danger him and him feeling, man, if I make another mistake, what does my career look like? Because we all saw what happened with the rookie last year that wasn't performing, right? Like, the pressure at Red Bull is extremely high. And once again, we're seeing with overall, it's Max Verstappen, no other teammates close. It's just Max just makes you – Max is the greatest right now. And you got to give credit to credit is due, no matter who is his teammate. I mean, you mean to tell me that Liam couldn't get much out of the car? And I do understand the car did have power unit failure, right, I believe, and other issues. But again, seeing that graph a couple of times where Max was first and he was 20th, that was kind of demoralizing as well. But for me, it's just Isaac. And it's not because of what happened to him and what he did. It's just the comments to me, man. I just hope that young man doesn't take it to the point of worrisome, because that's not what you want as a young driver, knowing that this is your first year. You got the opportunity of a lifetime you've been wanting. Yeah, I think Red Bull, I don't know. It's just, it is tough. It is tough. And if it wasn't for Lewis's dad doing that, I don't know where that young man is today mentally, physically. You know what I mean? Because that could affect you, for a long period of time. So, yep.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Anthony Hamilton. That was the ultimate act of class, really. It was just so beautiful to watch. And this was somebody who understands racers, who they are on a human level, because he's seen it with Lewis when he was growing up. He knows exactly how to handle that situation in the right way. As for Helmut Marko saying what he said, excuse my language, everybody, but Helmut Marko, go fuck yourself. There we go.
Hold on, by the way, because Marge comments, he said Bierman crashed twice. Yes, he did, but he still had an okay race. He finished it. I mean, I don't know. Oh, come on, Shez, stop that.
Yeah, I mean, but he seriously compromised their weekend with those crashes.
Oh, absolutely, especially with the budget cap. Hell yeah, he did. He definitely did.
But we can look. What these guys made were rookie mistakes because they're rookies. We have been almost blessed, really, not in some way. We've got used to not having many crashes because we've had so many experienced drivers on the grid. Last year there were no changes going into the season until Franco turned up, and then Franco started making rookie mistakes. But these guys are going to make mistakes because they are learning. They are learning what the jump from F2 to F1 is. And that's why Helmut Marko's comments are so damaging about Isaac, calling his crying embarrassing. Because this was his dream. His parents had surprised him the day before. They weren't supposed to be in Australia, but they flew out there to surprise him. And it was a really lovely video that my wife showed me of him seeing them. His adrenaline was going to be high anyway because it's the start of a race, but it's your first F1 race. You're going to be super. That was an outpouring of emotion that I think just was very natural and very human. And Isaac's a passionate guy. I mean, if you watch the rookie interview they did a few days before the race that they did in Bahrain, and you had Jack Doohan sort of taking the piss out of him for his going like, I destroyed the car. Like, you need to go and watch that, by the way, because that's hilarious. But that's just who Isaac is. He's being himself. He's expressing himself. He's putting his manner into the world. And you've got an old fart who's supposed to be mentoring him, by the way, just completely humiliating him on Austrian television. Like, absolutely awful. And I just hope that Isaac's got a good team around him who can pick him up and he can go in China and he can go and stick two fingers up at him, because that was just awful, absolutely awful. Rory, which rookie thread do you want to pick at?
I don't know. I think like Berman, of course, this weekend wasn't the best since having those two crashes in FP1, and then he missed the whole session of FP2 because there's a close proximity between them. And then, of course, it was FP3. Was it this second crash? I think, yeah. But yeah, that didn't help. It compromised his weekend and the team's weekend because the team only had one car to get data from consistently. And then Berman, of course, he couldn't get the rhythm in for the weekend. So I hope he has a better weekend in China. Bortoleto, look, he in another response to Helmut Marko had other comments calling Jack Doohan a C-rated driver, a B-rated driver for Bortoleto, and you had Bortoleto basically going to Q2, nearly into Q3. Not Q3, but he showed pace in qualifying, and he stuck his fingers up to Marko as well. He's unlucky with that crash. I think it did look a bit suspicious, like you said, Baxty, that it was it kind of looked like suspension failure, but we don't know. Sauber haven't really said anything. James Key did say something to the race, but the race are kind of like reading through the lines because he wasn't very clear on what they said it was. Hajar, yeah, it was unlucky for him to crash. The reaction from Marko wasn't the best, and I think it just proves why we given Helmut Marko a mic in 2025 and given listening to him for quotes. What else? We have Fernando Alonso, the other rookie, the oldest rookie in the field. He crashed it, and unlike Lance, who I would have missed when I watched that crash live, I thought it was Lance Stroll crashing, and then I saw the helmet and it was Fernando, and I took back my words, what I said at the time. But yeah, that wasn't great. What else we had? Who else crashed? Oh, Doohan, sorry. Doohan, yeah. I was waiting for that Franco Colapinto camera shot just to like when Doohan crashed. In fairness to Doohan, he did make it further than Hajar, but that's still another thing. But no, Doohan, no, yet. I think it was it's going to increase the pressure going into China. But yeah, I think it was overall it was a baptism of fire for rookies. But yeah, hopefully China will go better. The sprint weekend is going to be if they make a mistake, it's going to be more heartbreaking because they only have one practice session. Yes, they can make setup changes, but they don't have those two other practice sessions in the weekend. So and that's it.
Yeah. Marshall, do you want to pick? Is there a rookie thread upon which you wish to pull?
Well, first of all, I mean, all the rookies were crashing, and none more prominent than noted rookie Fernando Alonso, because even Kimi Antonelli knows that Fernando Alonso is a rookie. But all right, it was a rough day for the rookies, and I just want to say that, like, of all the rookies that crashed here, that it's thank goodness that they don't let IndyCar drivers get super licenses, because, you know, if F2 drivers were this bad, then just imagine how bad IndyCar drivers would be, right, Shez? Because, you know, you can't trust an IndyCar driver to drive a Formula One car when the series that is designed to foster Formula One talent and bring them up the ladder doesn't seem to be doing the job.
True story.
And it's like, I think it's so weird that there's such a resistance. Like, this is the first year in many years where there's been, you know, a mass graduation of Formula 2 graduates. And it's ironically in a year where F2 had just changed their machinery, so it was less compatible to Formula One than ever. And that the last few, like the handful of F1 reserve drivers and actual F1 drivers that did win championships or came close, kind of washed out pretty quickly. Like, remember when Theo Pourchaire was like the big thing, and remember when Callum Ilott, and was a Ferrari reserve driver, and remember that Mick Schumacher guy? Whatever happened to him? I don't know what happened to that guy. He seems to.
He's currently on
I know.
on an Alpine somewhere.
Yeah,
fixing
he's going.
engines.
He's doing some like sports car stuff, right?
He
Which
is somewhere in Edstone trying to figure out life, I guess. He's somewhere.
yeah. He's asking for the Wi-Fi password in the factory. Just wondering what he can do. But I'm joking. I mean, obviously Mick was not that bad, but he did crash a lot of cars. Like, and it's weird because in F2 he wasn't really known as a crasher either. But I just feel like the F2 ladder is either F1 is failing their graduates or their graduates are failing F1. Because we've seen very few of them come up. Like we've seen, I think Piastri skipped, didn't he? He won F3 and did.
No, he did F3 and he won F3.
And then he won F2, yeah. So like he was a exceptional talent. And then who was it who skipped? There was somebody who skipped.
Antonelli skipped F3 to go into F2.
Max Verstappen seemed to skip the entire formula.
Yeah, he skipped the whole thing. Lando won both.
No, he didn't. No, Lando did not win F2.
Oh, Russell won F2 that year.
Yeah,
Russell
and he won F3 as well. He's with Piastri in that.
Yeah,
and Bortoleto did the double as well.
I actually watched most of the races that year. Yeah, Russell kind of smoked the field that year a little bit. Yeah, I mean, and Albon was racing in F2 that year too. That was a heck of an F2 year. That was a good one. But since then, we haven't really seen the mass graduation. I think the class of 2019 would have been the last sort of mass influx of F2 drivers. So I don't know. I wish that they had made them more compatible, so that the drivers coming up, like you see, Antonelli and Behrman, they're well suited to it, and they can obviously drive a Formula One car. But they finished 13th and 14th in the championship last year, or something like that. It's not, or I think they were 9th and 10th, weren't they, at the end? I can't even remember. I know they were well down, but obviously there's just not a correlation here. There's not a correlation between F2 and F1 that's meaningful. And this is why I think that you should give a punt if you're, looking at other series, other continents. Why not? Like we've seen drivers kind of translate their skills to IndyCar from other places. Why not try and bring in someone from IndyCar and see if they can adapt to Formula One? Because I think that it's different in a lot of ways, but it's not that much more different than F2 to F1. Obviously you've got the tracks that and stuff, but anyway, I think that Antonelli really showed well. He made mistakes, but he was still there at the end, and they made the right call on the tires. And I was like, how the heck is he fifth? Like, how did this happen? Like, he came. Well, he was fourth at the end, but I mean, like when I was watching the race, before he got by Albon, I was like, how is he up in fifth? Like, how did that even happen? So, instead of focusing on the rookies that struggled, I want to celebrate the one that showed well. I think that he does deserve, a round of applause for, the entertaining pass that he put on Albon for one. That was pretty cool. I think he had the overtake of the day.
I think Oscar might have something.
Yeah, Oscar.
The psych of Oscar is
I know. But obviously, like Oscar doing his recovery drive to 9th was pretty cool. But
by the way, and I'm sorry to intervene, I watched the Antonelli on board yesterday, the whole race. You wouldn't know that him and Bono, that this was their first race together.
Bono's pretty good, eh?
It was so different. It was it was in a race where rain occurred and chaotic first race for him. You would have never known that this was their first ever race together.
So the contrast between Ferrari
contrary for Ferrari and Lewis, if you're an
Yeah.
LH fan and you watch that onboard with Antonelli, you're literally scratching your head and you might have lose some hairs and been just going chaotic because you could have seen the communication was, how you feeling? This is this. Got it. Yes. Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's it. Simple. Boom.
But I think that with the rookies, though, they will get better. I think this is a really hard first race, like a really hard situation to jump into. Changeable conditions, temporary track. It's kind of like the perfect storm of everything that could go wrong. So I think that it'll settle down, and they'll, by race 6 or 7, we'll forget that they're rookies. They'll just be part of the show.
Or in Jack Doohan's case, he'll be out already. If we're
or Fernando Alonso will no longer be driving.
Now, before
I take that, I did say before the year.
You did.
I did say that. I did say Fernando might not have a seat.
Before I let Shez respond to some of the things that Marshall said there was a reason why Marshall said what he said, and that was responding to a point that was made by Shez in our latest video where we made our predictions on who the Cadillac drivers would be. You can find that on the channel. Shez, floor is yours.
Thanks. I mean, I don't know how I followed that really, but all I say is I completely disagree with everything you've just said, Marshall. I think that is my prerogative, and I will take it. Okay. First of all, the rookies actually weren't that bad, I thought, and it's always, I think, a folly to try and judge everybody on one race. But I think the two that stood out for me were Bortoleto and Antonelli. Antonelli, obviously a rookie champion in 4 F4 seasons. But didn't he win like 4 F4 seasons in 2 years or something? It's pretty impressive. And he finished 6th in the F2 championship last year in a misfiring Prema, no less. I thought it was pretty good. And I thought actually that's a good point you made, Marshall, about the fact that the F2 car has changed last year, and there is a little bit of a correlation gap between F2 and F1, which can probably explain quite a bit. But Bortoleto also, I think, follows my standard rookie rule, which is that if you are a rookie champion in F2, and especially if you won F3 the season before that, you're probably going to do pretty well in Formula One. The form book doesn't really lie on that. Lewis, Nico, Hulkenberg, that is. Who else is there? Charles, Oscar,
George Russell.
George Russell, blimey. And George, let's not forget, George won it in an absolute epic season, right? That was a high point of F2 brilliance. Yeah, all right, Fly, calm down. But my point about IndyCar is that I would argue that there is a big chasm between an IndyCar and a current generation Formula One car. The F2 car has evolved over time. IndyCar, they're still using the DW12. That's a 12-year-old chassis, right? Yes, they introduced ground effects a bit earlier than Formula One did, but the gap in technology in a championship where the engineering is competitive versus where it isn't, and when the feeder series have also evolved over a period of time, means that gap between an F2 car and an F1 car, I think, is narrower than an Indy car. And that's why I made that point about the fact that I think that I'm not saying stay in your lane. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I think everybody should be given an opportunity. But I think if the crop of rookies struggled in the way that they did this weekend, although I do think there's a correlation between how well they did in last season's F2 championship and how well they did in that race, then I'd expect an IndyCar driver to struggle proportionately more. And that's not because they lack ability, and it's not because I don't think that they would do well in Formula One, but it is a different discipline. It works the same way backwards as well. if you take an F1 driver and plonk them in an Indy car, they're not immediately going to do well unless you're Marcus Ericsson. I don't know how he did what he did, but it's a different set of skills, I think, and certainly when I watch these guys on board, it feels like a different championship and a different set of skills that you need. I do want to talk about Kimi. I thought Kimi was brilliant. Not just that pass at the end, but also the control that he seemed to have of that car in the wet was something that the other rookies, and actually some of the more experienced drivers, Carlos Sainz, I'm looking at you, also didn't seem to have. And it was an absolute joy to watch. But to be fair, even when he wasn't in the wet, in the dry, man, he was just so fun to watch. He was just chucking that car in with gay abandons like he'd been in a Formula One car his entire life. And it does help that he's got someone like Bono in his corner, because unlike Ricky Adami, Bono's had a series of really seasoned drivers that he's been engineering for. I mean, if you look through the list, it's what, Jensen, Michael, who came after Michael? Lewis. Yeah, there you go. He has an understanding of what different drivers need, and I think that's what Kimi needed. That's what Kimi needed, and it allowed him to flourish on the day. Brilliant to watch. I'm really looking forward to him, but I would not count out Bortoletto based on just one accident in the race, because his qualifying prowess was pretty impressive. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to do.
So I just want to say, obviously, I was being moderately facetious about, making any conclusions based off of one race. I'm obviously not doing that. It's going to be, hard for them to jump in and just be, on it in the first race. I'm just making the point that in IndyCar, I really don't think that the competitive balance in F2 is anywhere close to IndyCar, because you lose the champion after every season. So you're basically racing against people who are also on the ladder. There's no Scott Dixon, there's no Will Power, there's no Joseph Newgarden. When you're coming into IndyCar as a rookie or as a new driver, you have to race against the best that they have to offer in that series. It's not a bunch of other guys who are aspiring to be Formula One drivers. These are professional level drivers and champions in their own right. Scott Dixon's a 7-time world champion, or 7-time IndyCar champion, and Will Power's 2 or 3, Joseph Newgarden's 3. These are good drivers. And Palou, he's got 3 as well now. So, these are not slouches. These are not people who are just looking for the next step. So if you can come in and you can show well in IndyCar, and specifically we're talking about Colton Herta, the kid is the real deal. He's been loyal to Andretti, probably to his own detriment, but that car is not one of the top cars in IndyCar, and they've struggled to do more than win a few races here and there, and his pace over his teammates has been solid. He's young, he's adaptable, and part of the IndyCar thing is that these drivers they do have to be adaptable, because an IndyCar is so different from everything else that I actually think that helps them. That when you go to IndyCar and you have to drive this alien vehicle with no power steering that's not like anything else, you have to deal with what it's throwing at you. I think if you take them back into a Formula One context, they're more able to unlearn everything that they've learned, because they've had to already unlearn everything once. So I look at like Scott McLaughlin and how he's doing in IndyCar and just how transferable and adaptable he is. And I think that Colton could do the same and surprise a lot of people. He will have an adjustment period, but so will these rookies. And I just think that people should ignore them at their own peril. I think that there's a lot of talent on this side of the pond, and I don't think that people should be ignored for opportunities just because they didn't take the F1 ladder.
We could talk about this all day, as like we did with Ferrari, but we've got to move on. A couple of things that I'd want to cover that I think are important to cover. Announced today by the FIA that there is going to be a new rear wing test because they have apparently animatedly towards the team said that they were concerned about the level of rear wing flexing. The accusation has been leveled at McLaren, potentially Ferrari as well. And it's believed that the complaints have been coming by, guess who? Red Bull. Just basically on this one, just somebody just jump in. What do you think? So the rule is it had to be 2 millimeters, no more than 2 millimeters in Australia. That's going to be 0.5 millimeters in China, but with an allowance of 0.25 because obviously they are going straight from Australia to China. But in Suzuka, from Suzuka onwards, it will be a very strict 0.5 millimeter allowed on the rear wing. So who wants to jump in on that one first?
I will, and I'll be real quick. It won't make any difference. None. McLaren is still faster. It won't make any difference.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on the wing test? Okay, right. So the next, right, that's that one covered. I think we all. To be fair, I agree with Marshall. It probably won't. Red Bull always seem to go for this tactic of, oh, well, if we silver bullet them, it'll be fine. They did it to Mercedes for years, like with the party mode. Oh, well, the party mode will solve all our problems. And then Mercedes destroyed them in the next qualifying session. So, yeah, classic Red Bull. Okay, the big news before the race was the announcement that Cadillac would be coming. We made a whole video on it. Please go and watch it. About the drivers. General thoughts on Cadillac coming. I think it's great. I think we need more cars on the grid. It provides more opportunity for IndyCar drivers, for more rookies to potentially come through. I think it's a fantastic thing. Who wants to comment on Cadillac?
The only thing that I'll say is that I wish we would have done our predictions today, because if that was the case, I think Marshall kind of convinced me to pick a couple guys from IndyCar to bring them over for Cadillac, but now that's a little bit too late. No, listen, I think being in the U.S., and I know a lot of people now have gotten into F1, not just because of the racing, but because of the Netflix series and things like that. I know a lot of people here were looking forward to Audi, but I know a lot more were looking forward to Cadillac. And I think American Motor Press, that type of nostalgia, the history, the names that go with it, it's not even more exciting. Not saying that Haas isn't exciting already, but I think Cadillac has an opportunity if F1 allows it. And if Cadillac does things correct from the get-go, not wait 5-10 years to be competitive, get names on the grid, get their factory set up together to make it happen. But they have the necessary needs that is needed, not only to promote, but to definitely put something on the track that is American, and I get it. The drivers won't be American. Not saying that Logan Sargent doesn't deserve, and not go there. But again, I think being in the U.S., I know a lot more people are looking forward to this. They were wanting it since last year, and I think we also did a little bit of talk on this on the spaces when we were told that they weren't going to be added. It's funny how things work, right? Let's give it time, right? There's something missing here, and look at them now. Now they're in it. So I guess from this side of the world, I would say it's very exciting. It is definitely going to get a lot of people into the sport if they haven't been already. So I guess they're very, it's something that when I've attended a couple of pre-race stuff here in Miami for the last 3 years that they've had the F1 race here, people have always flocked towards the Haas section because obviously North Carolina, the connection, knowing that Cadillac is not going to be representing that and probably a much bigger stature in a much bigger state, that's the part that I feel is going to be more very intriguing. And again, if they can get it started from the get-go, I think it's going to be great for them.
I just want to know if Cadillac will paint their cars yellow or not, because Marshall will probably get this reference because of the Cadillac curse in World Endurance Racing, of their cars being painted yellow and not doing so well. So if I want to know if this Cadillac curse will continue into from WEC and IMSA, but no, be serious. I think this is a good move by F1. I hope it's a few more teams can get in on the grid in the coming years and see how see how this goes. But I think it'll be interesting, especially with the new regs coming in, to see how it will go forward. But we have to remember they're not using a Cadillac engine so forth at the start. They'll probably make their own suspensions and so forth, or lend it off. That the rumor is it's Ferrari engines. I think Ferrari have confirmed Cadillac will use their engines, but until 2028 or near 2030, that Cadillac will have their own engine. So yeah, I think I'm happy.
Yeah.
I can't wait for next season. But yeah,
I commend them for that, because that's my complaint with Audi, that they don't want to, they're like half in, half out, because they don't want to run with an engine that's not an Audi. And so they're just kind of existing right now as a semi-entity. So I commend Cadillac for having the bravery and the foresight and the understanding of having your brand in F1 being more valuable than whether it's a, strictly GM power unit in the back of the car. It shows a lot more understanding of the realities of the commercial side than what I think Audi has been doing. And it's been a big source of frustration for me to watch them kind of tool around with Sauber name on the car, with Stake and Kick and whoever, just waiting till when they're brave enough to put their 4 circles on there. So, and as for Cadillac, I'm here for the Checo Perez redemption arc. That's what I want. I want Checo's chapter to end on a happy note.
Shez, have you got anything to add? Or
I don't think so. I'm sort of moderately excited about Cadillac, but I do realise that I'm slightly in a minority on the bottom of this chat, and that I'm not from North America. I don't watch a lot of World Endurance, and I don't watch a lot of IndyCar. So Audi all the way. Although, yeah, there's a very big risk. They're a Toyota just waiting to happen. Oh, I'd be really disappointed if that's what happens.
Yeah. Okay, we've taken up enough of your time. Thank you for listening to us and watching us. But we're going to have one quick fire round. I want from each of you your favourite race in China and your prediction for the Grand Prix winner. Screw the sprint race. I can't be bothered with that. Just a quick prediction for the Grand Prix winner. I will go first to set the tone. Favourite race, 2011. Lewis Hamilton nearly doesn't make it to the grid because they're basically sorting something out in his car. They get him out with about 20 seconds to go. He then goes on and wins the race, chases down Sebastian Vettel, who had just started upon one of the most dominant seasons we've ever seen. And Lewis produced an unbelievable drive to win that race in China and kind of remind everyone, hey, I'm actually pretty good. And my prediction for the Grand Prix winner is Lando Norris. Okay. Shez, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody is saying anything other than China 2018, you're wrong. But that's that's my favorite Chinese race. I actually watch that every now and again because it's just fun to watch Danny Rick go down the inside of Valtteri Bottas and then have a slightly lewd radio comment afterwards as well. I like it. Prediction for the race, I am going to say Oscar Piastri, him. Yeah.
Fly, what about you?
2004, Schumacher, best lap. Winner of the race. Oh, man, Lando Norris.
Lando Norris. Okay, 2 for Lando Norris, 1 for Oscar Piastri. Marshall.
So I'm gonna get hate mail here, but 07.
I would say 2007. I knew he was going to say that.
Just because it was one of the most
it's because that
ludicrous
IndyCar comment, isn't it?
It's just one of the most ludicrous things I've ever seen a team do is leave a driver out on bald tires. Like, oh my goodness. And like just the improbability of Kimi coming back and winning that championship is still something I cannot wrap my head around. When you look at the standings, with 3 races to go and you say Kimi wins it, you can't invent a scenario where that would ever happen again. And I know I'm not making it any better. I'm sorry. But yeah, that 07, the ending is just, you can't write that. That's just too weird. But as for my prediction, I'm going to say Lando Norris.
Okay,
By the way, for our viewers, I do want to take credit of putting our 2 great gentlemen down there side by side. I think it's been amazing. So please, you have to watch the YouTube back if you haven't. The way that these two, like, they can literally turn to the left and right, and it looks like they're looking at each other. This is great. All right, go ahead, Bax.
Well, and to close this out, Rory, favorite race and prediction?
Because I've been watching F1 since about, I haven't seen much China races. I'm going 2018. It was one of my favorite races ever. Ricardo, how the whole weekend went, how he nearly didn't qualify for qualifying with that, like, he had an issue, and he came back and he did. It was insane, but it was one of his best races, I think. Race wins. Well, my winner, because it looks like Lando Norris, out of all predictions, is going to win. I'm going to say Oscar Piastri, just to level out.
And of course, we will get AJ's prediction to you, because I'll probably put together another one of our little prediction videos. Hence why I was asking you guys this. Also, a shout out, honourable mention to Nico Rosberg getting his first win in 2012. I had to be a Mercedes fan there and just put that one there. But guys, thank you so much for watching. And
China's
for listening.
also Red Bull's first win ever too.
China 2009. That was a fun race.
Yeah, Vettel, Red Bull. Yeah, it's fine. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find us on Spotify. You can find us on iTunes. If you are also watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below. Like the video. We're enjoying making all this content for you, and we want to carry on doing so. And we want to know that, and we've seen a bit of growth on the channel recently. Really, really fantastic to see that. So thank you on behalf of all of us. And if you are listening on Spotify or iTunes, 5-star review, please. Like, hit notification buttons so you never miss. And if you don't do that, George Russell's going to come and find you, because the general philosophy of this podcast is it's all George Russell's fault. You can find Shez, Tide GP on YouTube, Shezmed on the socials. You can find Marshall, Double Wave Yellow on Threads. Fly, you can find Apex63 on Twitter. Rory Talks Motorsport on Instagram. Rory Talks F1 on Twitter. You can find me, BaxtyB, on both Twitter and Threads. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and we shall speak to you all very, very soon.